over to the camera.
I'm Duncan Speakman, and I'm here at Inbetween Time Festival as one of the makers of Our Broken Voice.
Brilliant, and that happened just roughly several hours ago, a couple of hours ago?
Yeah, it's just happened a couple of hours ago in the centre of Bristol, well, the shopping centre of Bristol in Cabot Circus, and as usual with these things, it's very hard to know how many people came because they all stayed quite invisible and stuck to the instructions. So yeah, we think maybe 100, 200 people came, and so far the response has been good. So yeah, it seems like it went well.
And it's what you term a subtle mob?
Yeah, it's a subtle mob.
What's a subtle mob to a person on the street?
So a subtle mob is a mass participation sound walk. So it's a piece where the audience, the participants, download an MP3, and we kind of talk of it like a film without cameras. So the soundtrack that they download on the MP3 has got all the elements of a film apart from the pictures. So it has the story, sort of. It has soundtrack and music, and it has actions for you to carry out. So essentially you're performing in this film, but at the same time watching other people who are performing different actions, becoming different characters and roles in the story. And everyone does it at the same time, but there's a goal that it's not a very visible performance. It sort of integrates with the world that's around it.
Okay.
And so if you're taking part, you know it's going on, but hopefully to bystanders and to the sort of public moving through the space, they don't notice anything's happening.
Until the very end.
Until the very end.
The two subtle mobs I've done, they've ended with people grouped together or doing something particularly interesting, like dancing in the street. And there were, I think, probably about probably 30 to 50 of us just stood outside one of the exits of Cabot Circus, and people, like passers-by, were just stopping and looking in the same direction, looking for the thing that we were all looking at, because we're both looking at
It's a thing we haven't solved yet. With the previous one, we definitely had a moment.
Do you see that as a problem then?
Well, no, it's not a problem, but it's... With the last one, we had a group moment that was definitely a concession to the audience, because we had this thought that people are going to come down and they're going to put this effort into making the piece. You know, it's made by the audience and it's made by the people who take part, and I love that. I love the fact that it's, you know, they own it entirely. And we thought, well, you know, really they should also be able to share that, even though they've been invisible and that. So we had this sort of dance. With this one, we actually sort of stepped away from that a bit, and we thought, because of the nature of the piece and the subject matter, we wanted, without spoiling it for anyone who might do it in the future, we sort of wanted people to sort of dissipate and end up travelling on their own, actually quite isolated. And so one of the final parts is that people do keep walking, and it doesn't really tell you to not leave this area. There's no instruction. We changed something. We didn't give a map with this one. We didn't say you have to stay in this area. And at some point it does ask you to sort of stop and turn and look back at where you've been. But what was interesting for me was that people still naturally group, and they naturally feel this sort of...
I was already looking back at that point. I'd felt the need to turn around and look back at...
Before you'd been given...
Just before I'd been given the instruction.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, so it's not a problem, but we definitely were trying to see if we could move away from that moment where it becomes very visible, in a way. And although, I liked the image. I liked that moment of suddenly seeing every exit, all these people sort of stopped and looking back. But... yeah, I guess we need to push it a bit more so people do kind of really dissipate off into the night. And then. And
you say story sort of?
I say that because we definitely pushed for a stronger kind of narrative structure with this one.
Okay.
I don't think we've quite... It's not quite at the point we want it to be at yet. But the last one was definitely a series of fragments of moments, you know, this kind of almost a freeze frame in a way, like lots of
I think
portraits.
This one felt more like a collage.
Yeah, definitely more of a collage, but also we definitely tried to push that timeline sort of narrative. So you have this kind of this idea that there's an event that you hear the aftermath of. So it happens at the end of the piece, in this case 6:30, and you're sort of playing out the half hour leading up to that. So I think we've almost got that right. I don't think it's still quite shaped enough, but that's kind of the idea, that it is a real-time half hour leading up to that moment. But what you're hearing is this kind of reflection, and there's a number of different stories of different people within this, and I want to find a way to sort of facilitate that discussion between people afterwards, because I think one of my favourite things is that moment when people start sharing what happened to them. And with this one, when people did that, they also realised that they'd each got different takes on the same story and could feed into each other's characters in a way. You're not really told who your character is, you're just given the physical mechanics of your person, so it leaves you to kind of fill in the gaps, but other people are given a sort of a different character profile of you in a way. So yeah, we're still looking at ways to make that story happen.
Yeah, I found that very interesting in that it started out me doing the actions of another character, but very soon there were parts of me that went into the character. For example, you're asked to write something, you're not told what to write, so obviously a part of you sort of bleeds into that. And then, because I had to write a note and then I'd hand that note over, and I think I said this before, there was something there of handing over a little bit of me as well as the note, which I felt much more integral in this piece than I had done before.
Oh, that's good. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a big shift for us, actually, the sort of instruction mode of, you know, before it's definitely been about you, and we wanted to see what would happen if, rather than having to shift constantly from the, okay, now you're doing this, now you're watching, now you're doing this, now you're watching, if we make the whole thing a fictional description but tell you to be part of that, you know, will that work? So that's good news that you felt more integral. That's a good thing.
And I thought also interesting that, because obviously the first subtlemob, as if it were the last time, was kind of about a negative thing, but was a very positive experience, and this piece was quite dark, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I think there's something very interesting about when you're placing so much the weight of world creation on one person's shoulders, when you're at the centre of the experience.
Wow, I don't know if I hadn't thought about it like that.
I think you do have to be quite careful in a way about how much ethically you're involving someone in this world, which is just their creation, and like how do you. Obviously, so that hadn't really entered your.
Well, I guess I mean, I had thought about the ethics of.
I thought it was still very light-handed and was very. It didn't weigh on you too heavily, and I'm kind of interested in how you struck that balance.
Do you know? I don't know if I know how we struck that balance. If we did strike the balance, I think initially we thought it was going to be really about implication, and we started pulling away from that because we realised that it wasn't about that. It was about the suggestion of guilt in terms of the story. So I guess we pulled away from making clear elements of guilt and focused it more on. I guess in the end we sort of focused it more on the lives of these people and used the event as a framing for that, rather than them being. So it's almost like there's two narratives going on and one frames the other one, rather than actually them being interwoven. And the idea of, world creation is kind of funny because I guess for me what was difficult with this one was going, okay, we're going entirely fictional, but we're putting it in this real environment. And what's been different about that, I guess the balance is probably because you still know lots of people there aren't involved in the fiction, and you're kind of reading them into it, but you know they're not part of it. So maybe that's where the balance comes.
Interesting.
Oh, I don't know. I need to think about this.
Okay.
The weight of world creation on one's shoulders.
Okay, well that's just kind of all I had to sort of off the top of my head to
Okay.
talk to you about. So thank you very much for talking
No problem at all.
to me and the internet.
No problem, internet.
I hope the piece continues to develop in the way that you want it to.
Thanks for coming.
Yay.